Welcome back. I'm Rebekah.
And I'm Gabe, and welcome to another episode of Rhythms for Life, where we're continuing to talk about marriage, what it means to be a couple that's fighting for your marriage in all those different ways where fights aren't always looked at as a good thing. But in the process we've been going through in these conversations is when we fight for each other, when we fight for our marriage, we actually have this opportunity to heal. And today we have with us Dr. Morgan Cutlip. She's a author of a new book, A Better Share, How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. And so
Gabe kind of honed in on
Well,
last two words.
we're talking about sex.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to learn. I want to keep growing. And so today that'll be part of the conversation. And in our book, The Fight for Us, we talk about this journey that I know we had to go on as a couple, from sex being a transaction to becoming something more intimate and connected and really becoming a second thing. Because I came into marriage thinking marriage is all about sex. Like, it's a first thing. Like, this is like top priority.
Roll.
I think a lot of men do.
Yes.
And then you start to understand, like, no, that's not how God designed this to function.
Yeah.
And so excited to get into all the dynamics of relationships. You're an expert, PhD in psychology. You've helped hundreds of thousands of couples really work on healing in their relationships. And so we're just grateful to have your voice and for you to be with us today. So thanks
I'm
for being
grateful to be here.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me.
And I love so much how you talk about how you have more fun, then less resentment, then great sex.
There's an see,
Like,
you see the order, and he
I'm
goes
like,
straight to the end.
I'm reading that going, oh, it feels like there's a sequence here that, like, when I don't resent you, I actually might
Yes.
enjoy sex. So yes, this is going to be good. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Oh,
So talk to us about just this concept of a mental load, because that's something you write about
yeah.
in your book, and how
Yes.
much that can really cause a lot of challenges in a relationship.
Okay, so this is a bit of a long answer. If you'll just sort of give me the grace to answer it. So there's a 30,000-foot definition of the mental load, which is it's the seemingly never-ending running to-do list we carry around in our minds, and it has two key components. Most of the tasks involved in it are invisible. This is important because it's hard to hand them off, and it's hard to get appreciation and acknowledgement for all the things we do. The second piece is it takes up cognitive real estate. So this crowds out space for peace, patience, presence, managing your emotions, regulating this stuff, and then getting in the mood for sex.
Yeah.
So everybody has a mental load. You have one. My kids have one. You have one.
Yeah.
All have one.
Yeah.
But in home and family life, it is predominantly carried by women, whether they work full-time, part-time, any of these things. And the
Yeah.
reason why that's important to understand is because when it feels as if this is navigated in a way that is unfair or disproportionate, a lot of times resentment will start to develop, or overwhelm will really take over, and burnout. And when the women in the home are burnt out, we're not able to fully show up for our families and pour into them. So it's become a big point of disconnection in relationships
Yeah.
and frustration and resentment.
So let's talk about the invisibility.
Yes.
I hear you say that, and I'm like, I feel like I know. But then when you say invisible, do you mean it's a load of things I'm not even aware of, or they can't really be named, or they haven't been named?
Yeah. So I have a in the weeds definition that kind of answers
Yeah.
some of this. But when I say invisibility, I mean more so it might be hard for you to articulate. So you feel the weight of it, but you can't maybe explain it to Gabe. And the other piece is that your partners often don't see it.
Right.
So a lot of things with a mental load, we're doing sort of in the dark, behind the scenes, stocking the toilet paper, filling out the permission slip. So the in the weeds definition, I have a diagram in the book, actually. A visual I think is really helpful. But if you imagine 3 circles, like a Venn diagram, there are 3 domains of tasks when it comes to the mental load. There's the physical. Stereotypically, guys crush it with the physical. They're like, yeah, I'll mow the lawn. I did the dishes. Baby, feel good. And we're like, no, I'm still overwhelmed. There's the mental. That's like making the lists, checking things off. Work is a lot of our mental stuff, thinking about what you get from the grocery store. And then there's the emotional labor. And that's the piece that's really hard to articulate. And that's the ongoing regular calculations we make on behalf of family members to try to maximize their positive experiences.
Wow.
That's so well said. I mean, that is so you.
Like, do you have
Like
do you have an hour?
it's like 2 in the morning,
Oh my.
It's like
Can
it's
we
like
talk
future
about our
projection.
yeah, it's like
Yes.
2 in the morning. It's like a child that's on her heart.
On your
Like, she's
heart.
just burdened and
Yes.
wakes up
I'm gonna
and
start crying.
Yes.
like it's heavy and it's
No,
The
but the
stakes
I don't
feel
I
high.
don't feel it the same.
Yes.
no, and the worst part, it's like sometimes I'm so like he goes, you should probably go visit someone and figure out why this bothers you so much. So that really does help
So-
intimacy.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
Dismiss it.
like,
You might need to do some work because I don't know why it's impacting you so badly.
which is a really common response, which is why I like to give this like really long-winded definition, because a lot of times, well, with the emotional piece,
Yeah.
the stakes feel high, which
Yeah.
is like why you're getting emotional
Yeah.
about it, because it's we're thinking about, the future of our children,
Yeah.
and are we setting them up for success, and are they going to be healthy, and are they going to love the Lord, and they like
Yeah.
all these things that we worry about.
yeah.
But the other piece is that when it comes to home and family life, the majority of tasks occur at the intersection of these
Mm.
3 circles, and I just made up a term for it. I call it the triple threat,
Mhm.
which shows how a seemingly simple task can be unpacked to reveal steps in each of these domains. So dinner's not just cooking dinner.
Mhm.
It's going to the store, chopping the food, thinking about what you have in your pantry and in your fridge, and it's
Yeah, the strategy.
yes, and thinking about who's going to eat what, and how do I make sure when our son's name is Roy. How do I make sure when I tuck him in at night at 9:30, he's like not starving for a snack,
Right.
and they get enough nutrition. So it
And it doesn't have
it-
food dyes, and then all of a
yes,
sudden,
now we're worrying about all
Yeah,
these
yeah, there's a
things.
whole
right?
load.
So it's just
And this guy adds to the load by now we have to grow all of our food.
oh my. Do you have chickens?
Oh,
course.
yeah. Of course,
have
we
chickens.
hen layers for eggs, but then we
Hens.
have meat birds.
Oh my god.
Where we now have to process our own protein and our.
But you did great at it, honey.
You're gonna be so much
Very
better
good.
for it. You're gonna feel so much better.
Except the mental load, and this is
Yes.
always thank you for free counseling, but this is what always becomes a thing. I go, babe, it's just too much. There's just too much of all the things, and he's like, he asks me then to logically list those things, and then when I start to say those things, he goes, yeah, but what part of that do you really do, like the outdoor stuff,
She
right?
does not take care of the chickens.
Okay. This is why this
But
this
here's the mental
visual
load of the
yes.
chickens. In the summer, it chronically smells like poop right by our pool when we're throwing parties.
Yes.
And so I'll be like, oh, I don't really feel like I want to invite people over for Joy's birthday party, but now she's going to be sad because she really wanted a pool party. But the whole outside smells like rotten poop.
Yes. So you're
That's a
thinking
mental
through
load.
all of these calculations. Well, what happens a lot of times in partnerships is the woman will be overwhelmed. And usually, our spouses feel that. Like I am very intense. When I'm overwhelmed, my husband gets scared of me when I need him usually the most. But our partners will feel our overwhelm. Then they'll say, well, what's overwhelming you? We list it out and it seems simple. And so they'll say things like, oh, you just make it too hard on yourself. Like, I don't know why you're making it harder than you need to. Or they dismiss it, or then we self-judge.
Yeah.
And women do not. We don't need more judgment toward ourselves. We're really good at that already.
Yes.
And so when we understand these simple tasks unpacked to reveal all of this head work, heart work, just emotional work,
Yeah.
it makes sense why we feel the way
Yeah.
that we do, and why there's also this disconnect between our partners and why they're not getting it,
Yeah.
and how they can step in and support, and we can have
No,
more
that's
grace in
good.
our
So
relationship.
basically, like a logical approach, while that might be just one of the domains, doesn't truly solve kind of like what's happening, right? Because when we list it and then we logically go like, you're right, I'll clean out the coops better, it'll be fine. I don't know. It's still just like the burden of like
Those, like-
all of it together
Mhm.
in our
Yeah.
whole. Partly, is it women are more like we're one big bucket and men are more compartmentalized? So like, is that true or no?
I think that's part of it. I
Yeah.
think that men are really good at sort of like sorting through and sifting through the things they want to hold, and the other stuff they're like, I'm not going to worry about that, which I think is a blessing. I wish
Yeah.
that were more like that.
Yeah.
I think we grew up in a culture that sort of shapes us a little differently,
Mhm.
where and we are designed a bit differently, which
Mhm.
factors into
Yeah.
these things. So women are very much invested in caretaking for our relationships. We're judged based on these things. I think it's a wonderful gift of women, but it can really wear us out. And men are shaped in a completely different way, which is I got to provide financial security. I've got to provide physical safety. And so it seems like that's where then the priority and the attention goes.
Mm.
And we're sort of prioritizing different things,
Yeah.
which can cause a lot of like cross wires and personalization of things and misunderstandings that might actually not be personal.
Wow.
It's good. Well, and I think, I mean, I feel like I have a mental load too. I mean,
Of course you
I
do.
carry a lot and invisible things, but at that emotional piece, I do
Yeah.
think
You're
feels
able to kind of put it down.
very unique. I don't know if this is to all women, if that's what
Mhm.
you're saying or not, but I know for Rebekah in our relationship, that's really unique. I don't relate to it as well.
No.
But I also think men then, because we're more compartmentalized when it comes to sex, we can sort of just cut that off and say, well, let's have sex, right?
Yes.
But what I understand about my wife and all women that God ever created
Yes.
is that just is not how it works.
Right.
Like this all works together. And for husbands
Right.
to wise up means you need to really take account that this is, and so that's what's so helpful is to
Yeah.
just better understand. Because you just explain some things I've
Yeah.
never heard before, right?
Yeah. Well, and even how the mental load emotionally impacts us physiologically,
Oh,
right?
gosh.
So
Yes.
that like even if we have a conflict, and we kind of don't really work it out, but we're like we still love each other and we'll figure it out. He's asleep in 30 seconds.
Yes.
I'll still lay there for like an hour,
Are we all married to the same man?
and I'm just
I
like,
think so.
and so I think I even grow this like micro resentment because he's not meaning to go to sleep and ignore me. I used to really take it so personal. I can be tempted to do that now. I'm like, no, he just really he's just able to just shut it off.
Yes.
And then, but that does become a micro resentment. Like, am I the only one that cares about like this relationship? Or, but then you're like, no, I care. And I'm like, well, do you care because you want to have sex, or is it because like you know what I mean? And that's not fair.
Yes.
That's not an accurate way to look at it. But I can see how those little resentments sneak up on you.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, oh my gosh, everything you said is just incredibly relatable. And I'm trying to think of like the most important piece to kind of pick up because there are a lot of directions you could go. But I talk in the book how almost every person in a relationship has like two main sort of desires, which is to feel safe and to feel loved in their relationship. And you can unpack those, like how do we meet those two things? They unpack to contain a lot. But I think if we paint with broad strokes, men and women experience these things differently. So for men to feel really secure and loved in their relationship, one of the main pathways is through sex. Whereas for women to feel safe and feel loved is like to have this emotional security in this relationship, to feel heard, to feel like you're there for me. You are reliable. I can count on you. You're sort of predictable to me, and you are invested in me in the relationship. And so a lot of times couples get in these standoffs where they don't want to give until they get. And they're both wanting this feeling of being loved and secure, but they want it met in these different ways. And so I think
The way that they receive it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much when it comes to sex is there like a mismatched desire thing going on to where
yeah.
do you find that men want to have sex more than most women? And does the data bear that out?
I mean, the biggest argument around sex is always around frequency and relationships. And, usually it's the man wanting more. Not always.
Right.
Anytime I've talked about this on social media, I get
Yeah.
tons of messages from women like, no, it's reversed for us. So it does go the other way too. But yeah, I just think we don't have a good understanding of how desire works in our relationships. And so there's a lot of just misunderstandings.
Yeah.
And I can explain it. But
Why do you think frequency is like the biggest debate? Is it because men want more and women want less?
Usually, yeah. It's usually there's just one person who wants more and then the other who's like,
Yeah.
you good with this? Or I could do a little less of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it's just,
Interesting.
yeah.
And it's based on kind of their core need of how they're feeling loved
I think there's a collision of things. So it's maybe how they feel loved. I think also just the physiology of how we're made is just men, desire sex a little bit more. Sometimes I think too, there's two different types of desire, which I think can clear things up for a lot of people. There's spontaneous and there's responsive. And we have glorified spontaneous, which is basically like a cool breeze moves through and you're like, oh, that kind of reminds me. And I'm now in the mood, and most men, not all men, most men fall into that category. That's what we see in the movies. That's what we see on shows.
Yeah.
Whereas women are responsive most often, which is you have to participate before you feel ready. And so because we've glorified this sort of spontaneous desire, a lot of women will think to themselves, well, if I don't feel in the mood, I must not be in the mood, but usually that follows participation.
Right.
And so there's often that mismatch going on as well. And so we have to have some insight into ourselves and how we experience desire. My husband and I always joke, I'm responsive, he's spontaneous, of course, I don't know, it's like the game is rigged. But we always joke it's never a bad idea. We're
Mhm.
always glad that we did that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great way to say it.
One of the studies that recently came out is talking about the changes in kind of the youngest generation of having less sexual desire, which this is kind of wild because you'd never imagine like the 18 to 29-year-old group is going to be the group that starts to have less interest in having sex. But we know because of the proliferation of porn and
Mhm.
all that's taken place to reshape in really bad ways people's vision of sex,
Mm.
that now the real thing feels less exciting, doesn't match up to perhaps what they've seen actors do in a studio.
Mhm.
And I know even for a lot of men older now, they're experiencing problems in their sexual life because of how much porn has interfered in their imagination. So I know there's mental load, and I know there's the emotional challenges going on in a connection of a relationship, but how much are you seeing that
Mm.
in terms of how people's imaginations have maybe been distorted about what sex was ever supposed to be?
Mhm.
And how would you encourage people who maybe that's their story right now
Mhm.
to start to work towards a path of really a new experience with sex? And what steps could they take?
Yeah. Well, I will right off the bat want to say this is not my main area of expertise in the porn bucket, but I'll speak to what I know, which is all the research that you're saying is the same as I've read. I've also read things about how the more porn you consume, you sort of have to like increase the intensity of
Right.
that porn in order to get that same sort of
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
And it's become incredibly problematic in relationships. There's almost like no benefit
Mm.
to a relationship. I mean, some people sort of try to argue that one, like, oh, well, it helps our sex life. And I don't see that when I read the research on this. It's more beneficial, more dangerous. And we also start to dehumanize the sexual experience.
Yeah.
And one of the most beautiful parts of sex in marriage is that marriage can be hard and it can be frustrating. We have these resentments that develop, but that is a time where we come together and sort of have that physiological response that helps us kind of become blind to some things.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
before marriage, eyes wide open, after marriage, eyes wide shut. And so I think it's incredibly important to have some very strict boundaries
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
porn and your relationship. And if you are in a sexual rut in your relationship, porn is not the answer.
Yeah.
That is not the solution for you. You need to talk to your partner and discover some ways to, if you want to change things up, spice things up, get some help, but don't turn to porn.
Yeah. Do you think like that's a great way to press in a little bit on a rut, because I do think what happens is like you might have a rut because of just distraction and again the load. Maybe you're in a season where it's just physical, like you just
Mhm.
have a lot of little like kids, toddlers, or you're both two dual income, right? You're both working full time. You're getting through those days. There's not even like a physical stamina,
Yes.
especially even if you've had babies or you're nursing, you're kind of like your body is a little bit like I don't have a lot left. But the problem is that rut kind of extends.
Oh, yeah.
And why is that? Like what are some ways to kind of return even when
Mhm.
you're not?
Feeling it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's like any kind of problematic pattern in a relationship. You can start with a rut, and then the more you sort of take that path, it becomes this deep, entrenched groove in your relationship, which is then now you're like, oh my gosh, now we have this giant
Yeah.
ditch to climb out of in our relationship. And so when it comes specifically to a sexual rut, I think there's certain tools that can be kind of helpful. One is scheduling it. People don't love this answer, like, oh, it takes a spontaneity. And my pushback is, well, if you're not having sex, isn't some sex better than no sex? And also, it's really, really helpful for a couple of reasons. One, if one partner has a responsive desire, which usually there's one, you get to think about it all day. You anticipate it. You're sort of priming your mental and your emotional state to engage in this later and get excited about it.
Sorry.
Oh,
Jack,
that's
can you
okay.
grab that? I think it's Rebecca's.
It's sorry, I don't know why it got turned on.
Sometimes there's certain numbers that will do that.
Can you turn the silent off on the side?
Thank you.
It's on the side.
So we talked about getting in a
Thank you.
rut.
Scheduling.
Well,
Scheduling, yeah.
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 jump back into that thought.
I know I had a thought. I was trying to think what it was.
Yeah, but just
Just
maybe,
keep going, or
yeah, we'll pick right back up. I mean,
okay.
you worked through how some
Oh,
sexes
yeah, I
really
have a
no
thought. When
sex.
you want me to just say it real quick?
No, I wanted to
Oh,
finish
you have
before
more
the
about
phone
your
is ringing while she's talking.
Did I finish saying about how the responsive desire person?
yeah, 'cause
You were
you get
just
to think
starting to
about it
talk
all
about
day.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead with that.
I think the other thing is that a lot of times when this rut has developed, there's one partner who leads an initiation. And so if they've been turned down a lot, they're going to be hesitant to jump back
Mhm.
in. So scheduling is sort of this neutral
Mm.
way to start to initiate sex again and get back out of that rut.
That's good. I'm going to quote James Clear here on habit forming, and I love the thing that he said. That one of the ways to kind of create and form a habit is make it easy. And that doesn't mean like make it easy because you've got some like porn or some weird, but like I have found with us, like it's more desirable and it's easy when we are both together alone in Cabo. So I feel like we should just move to Cabo.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are some ways to go, okay, now how do we can't live in Cabo for the 3 days we got away last year. But what can we do that creates some level of like, we're not responsible for the kids for this, what timing or even a nice dinner or, because I think for so many parents, it's hard to figure out how to make it easy. You're always trying to time it around.
Mhm.
And then it does start to feel a little bit like a transaction. And maybe
Mhm.
that's okay in certain moments because it's like better than nothing, but
Mhm.
you want both parties to really enjoy it. So what are some ways you would encourage people to like find that path of least resistance when you're
Yeah.
trying to get out of that rut?
Yeah. And the reason why it's so good in Cabo is because you've got no distractions.
Yes.
Your mind is probably empty. You've
Yeah.
laid by a pool all
Yeah.
day. You've had all this time to sort of sink in. And so I think that's one of the hardest parts of getting back into a healthy sexual relationship after kids is that we don't have a lot of margin to sort of like prepare our minds and our bodies for this. And so you want to try to find little moments to do that. I think that piece about deciding in the beginning of the day that you're going to do it later is really helpful to just start to align, where your head's at, to think about it, to imagine it, to start to get excited about it. Have that anticipation piece is really powerful. I think another is like, and I talk about this in the book, is couples have to recognize and men have to recognize, but both people, sex really starts outside the bedroom.
Mhm.
So, I've told my husband for like a year, like, you really need to take me out once a week. And he didn't really understand the importance of that. And when I finally was like, that's my foreplay,
Mhm.
he's like, done. It's like, okay, whatever gets you there, buddy. But, having that time to just feel like my partner's listening to me
Thank
and
you.
invest. Yeah, like to feel
Yeah.
pursued.
Yeah.
It's not
And
squeezed in, right?
right.
In the middle of something else.
Because there's not, it doesn't feel good when all day you're just like two ships passing in the night. And then at night, they're like, hey,
Yeah.
you're like, you barely looked at me all
Mhm.
day. And so to feel that effort, to feel that pursuit, I think really goes a long way for couples. And I know there are busy seasons where you can't take that time, but how can you build that in? I cannot remember who it was, but I listened to a speaker once who talked about how they would,
Before you start that,
oh, sorry.
talk right into it.
Sorry.
Okay. And then start. I can't remember who it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was, but I heard this speaker one time talk about how at the end of the day, every night for like 15, 20 minutes, they would lock all their kids out of their office. Maybe you've heard the speaker. It's like a pretty famous, it bugs me, I can't remember, and they would just have talk time together. And they ruthlessly protected this. And I think that little bit of effort and just time together and
Yeah.
connection makes a big
I
difference.
think that was Emerson Eggerichs.
Yeah.
And
It
he is
is
a friend of ours and
Emerson,
just
okay,
kept
yes,
counseled us
and
to do the same.
So I'm
top
friends
piece
of
of
joy.
advice.
So yes.
That's one of our
yeah.
strategies for people is
Yes.
you got to take that time
You do.
to create just emotional connection and just connection in general. And that's hard. You have to fight for it.
You do have to
And
fight
and the
for it.
phones and
Fight
devices
for your, yeah, fight for your marriage.
devices have gotten in the way of that a lot.
Gosh.
Or it's just, I think what my trigger, and I love, he knows this. I'm not saying anything that hasn't already been said. When he's in a hurry or he still has his phone in his hand, even after the workday, and my trigger is like, he still isn't really engaging me. Even though we're talking, he's like trying to get to the point or it needs to get, because you have a little harder time, like, unlocking task mode, and we
Mhm.
both
Yeah.
talked about this.
It's
Um,
my mental load.
yeah, you
So
have a
mental
mental
load.
load,
Always
right?
there.
Right. And so I think that's a bigger conversation we're having it because you're saying this is like more margin in is a good thing in all
Yes.
ways. And we've said this several times throughout this series. The margin is so needed
Mhm.
for the presence, right? For the eye contact, for the attunement.
Mhm.
Um, instead of just going like, oh, we got all these things and now we get to have sex. It's just
Yes.
like we're gonna make it a little harder.
Mhm.
Yes.
Guys, like it's just we don't mean to, but I think just I feel desire
Mm.
for you, not even like in a sexual way, but that follows, but just the fact that I desire you is it comes from having
Mhm.
that extended conversation,
Yes.
not interrupted, not distracted, not hurried,
Yes.
that all of a sudden creates that desire.
Yeah, my husband and I had to come to, like, a realization that he feels connected when we're just existing side by side, like, that's enough,
Yeah.
Mm.
and I feel connected when we're having this more intentional
Mhm.
time, and I think, these things, again, there's so many things in our relationships that easily become personalized and disagreements when we don't understand that we're just maybe a bit different
Yeah.
here, but
Yeah.
I gotta step toward you, and you gotta step toward me. We have to have humility and grace for each other, and then we can move forward in more of a
So good.
productive way.
Yeah, every conflict isn't necessarily a moral issue, right or wrong.
No.
It's just differences, and
Yeah.
the more mature I think we get in our relationships, we can recognize like these are just different things you
Yeah.
prefer,
Yeah.
different preferences. For couples who are listening to this and they're going, we really haven't had sex in a while. We hear more about sexless marriages.
Very
You would tell the story of a young couple, only been married 3 years, and the husband and I were talking, and he opened up and said, "Yeah, we have sex maybe once a month.
Mhm.
Like that's just kind of what we've always done." And I was shocked because I'm like, "Man, you guys are young. Like
Yeah. These are
once a
like
month
good old
now?"
these are the good times.
And the data shows that I think the average
Mhm.
45-year-old couple, it's once a week. I mean, I've looked at all the data frequency and how that's happening, but how would you encourage a couple who they're on the once a month plan? Is that healthy for a marriage? Would we say, "Hey, well, for that marriage, that's great," or would we encourage and say, "Maybe this should be happening a little bit more, and maybe there's more work to do"?
Mhm.
How would you counsel that?
It depends.
Okay.
So I think last I looked, it's something like 1 in 3 marriages are considered sexless. It's very, very high. So the right frequency, I've looked at all that research too, and what's
Yeah.
the norm, what's
Mhm.
going on here? And really the right frequency is what works for both people. So if this couple is like once a month is great for the
Right.
two of us, it's usually not the case.
Right.
But if it were, then great.
And it wasn't the case for this
Yeah,
couple.
yes.
The husband clearly wanted more sex than that.
Yes. So if it's not okay, I mean, there's a number of ways you can approach it. If she's willing, you can do the scheduling thing, and that tends to help.
Mhm.
Another piece is there are important conversations to have around sex, and I think sometimes women have a habit of sort of looking at sex as if it's just a physical act.
Mhm.
But sex exists in the context of our relationship and plays a really important role in our relationship. So we have to kind of come back home to knowing that because it changes how we approach it, how we talk about it, how we prioritize it. And there's a question that I think couples should always talk about when they are in this spot, which is what does sex mean to you in our relationship? And then the second piece is when our sex life isn't how you want it to be,
Mhm.
how do you imagine I feel about you?
Hmm.
Because I think we have to get to the heart of
Mm.
the important role that sex plays in our
Right,
relationship. And that
right.
opens up a dialogue
Yeah.
around, okay,
Mhm.
how do we make a plan for moving forward in a way that we both feel pretty satisfied
Mm.
with our sex life? Because, you don't want to like issue ultimatums or things like that, but there is a reality that when a sex life is not feeling good to one of the people involved in the relationship, just like when the relationship doesn't feel
Right.
good, but it leaves the relationship open to vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so
And
good.
so
It's a
it's
good
important.
warning, and
Yeah. I love how you've paired though. I mean, this is so powerful. The degree of mental load
Mm.
and the impact on that with the frequency of sex. And so while Gabe's over here going, how can people increase their frequency? I'm going to then ask, how do we decrease our mental load?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
because I think that's probably a universal conversation in a lot of couples. One feels like a need for one the other feels the need for the other. And because both are like missing each other,
Hmm.
because neither of those are probably in,
They don't see how they connect.
right. They are so connected, and it's like, no, we need to fix this, but we're not going to pay attention to this. Or we start with here, and then maybe hopefully this will change.
Hmm.
I can see now, of course, that would be integrated. The
Yes.
brain, the body, it's all integrated.
Mhm.
It's supposed to be in,
It's supposed to be
working together. So how would we begin with the mental load?
Yeah. So I think I read this in a book, but this author said that for a woman to get turned on, her brain needs to be turned off. And I think that like every man should like tattoo that somewhere. Like this is the secret answer. But I'll give like a couple just ideas for the men in the relationship and for the women, because it's a big conversation to talk about how you start to shift the mental load in the relationship. But I collected some survey data and then from women, and then I interviewed men and women on the mental load. And when I looked at the data, it showed very clearly what women want most around the mental load from their partners is number one, more initiative taking, and number two, more appreciation. So initiative taking is very vague. And I think that, if we all married the same man, I'll say if we did, then usually men want like very clear instructions. Like, what is that? Initiative taking? Are you kidding me? So I give a formula for initiative taking in the book. And really what it is it's deep knowing plus action. So you can't take initiative around the home and family life if you don't know where things are, if you don't know the schedule, if you don't know your family's preferences for
Right.
things. And so I challenge men, and this is broad strokes, so I know there's reverse situations, but I challenge men to do something called the Buffett principle, which is how you accumulate knowledge over time, which is every day when you go to bed, you know something more than when you woke up that morning. And so get to know 3 things every single day. One new thing about your wife, one new thing about your kids if you have them, and one new thing about how your home and family life functions. If you do this every day, you're going to increase your knowing, and you can translate that into action, and you can participate more at home, which is going to help her feel real good. Really good. And to be known is just bonding. So that feels good. The second piece is appreciation. My husband travels every week for work, so I usually am the one carrying everything for the most part. And I remember we went round and round about this one because he could not give me a compliment that did anything for me. And then I'd be like, that doesn't do it. And he'd get offended that I didn't accept his compliment. And so I created a formula for that too, because people need to know how to give good compliments. And I can go like 3 months on a solid one. So
That's awesome.
it's observation of either a personal quality or something that you notice, plus how it blesses your life. That is the best compliment you can get. I see how much thought you put into preparing our kids' snacks. It's so nice that I don't have to worry about that, and I know they get all the nutrition that they need. I appreciate you so much. Like, can you imagine if we did this? And it goes both ways. Both partners should do that. For women, and I'll wrap this answer up, but for women, one of the biggest things is like we have to take some ownership over how we get into a sexy state of mind. And we sometimes don't allow for much margin to really sink into that, to imagine it, to think about it. We need to take some ownership over our sexual relationship and shift from thinking it's something we do for our partners and instead become something we do with our partners where we are having pleasure and enjoying it too. And so we need to take a bit of accountability around that.
Yeah.
That's so good. Wow.
Well, this is a lot of great advice. In your book, A Better Share, How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. So well done. And
Thank
just,
you.
I think I know it's helping us. It's going to give us more and more to talk about, more activity for me to work on, more initiation.
No, less mental load.
And
Our work is to do less. Yes, that too. Just offload.
But thank you for putting yourself out there. I know these topics aren't always easy to talk about, write about, and you're helping more and more people get freedom by addressing these really important topics. So thanks for being one of
And
us.
the way you framed it, the framework is really helpful for men and women. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was such an honor. I appreciate it.